I had never spent much time in my grandfather's old hunting cabin. As a child, I visited once or twice, trailing behind my parents, who insisted we stay overnight so they could check on him. The place smelled of wood smoke and dust, with a faint undertone of tobacco from his ever-present pipe. I remember the fireplace in the main room, a wide stone hearth where my grandfather would stack logs and poke at embers with a crooked iron rod. He'd say he felt safest there, close to the fire, with his gun resting upright in the corner. When Grandpa died, he left the property to me in a brief handwritten will. Nobody contested it. My mother thought it would be good for me to have a quiet place in the woods, though I wasn't much of an outdoorsman, but something about the inheritance tugged at me, a curiosity to revisit those half-remembered childhood impressions. So, in late autumn, I took time off work and drove up the winding mountain roads to the cabin, ignoring the subtle sense of dread that churned in my stomach. The cabin greeted me with musty air and dusty surfaces. Outside, the evening sun dipped behind tall pines, casting long shadows across the clearing. I swept the porch, aired out the main room, and built a small fire in the ancient stone fireplace. Sparks crackled in the hearth, sending flickers of light dancing across the walls. A cozy scene, I told myself, yet a peculiar uneasiness lingered. That's when I noticed the loose bricks, just to the right of the fireplace opening. One near the bottom jutted out slightly. My first thought was that some small creature might be nesting behind it, but when I pried the brick free, I discovered, neatly tucked away, a worn, leather-bound notebook. The cover bore no title, just a patch of peeled leather. My grandfather's name, Gordon Fletcher, was etched inside the front page in his unmistakable handwriting. Intrigued and unsettled, I settled into an old armchair and began to read. The first pages were dated decades ago. They described routine hunting trips, deer sightings, weather observations, tallies of successful kills. My grandfather was thorough. He noted the hours he spent stalking game, the direction of the wind, even the type of ammunition used. At first glance, it was just a mundane hunting journal, but as I flipped further, I spotted an abrupt shift. The careful, even penmanship devolved into terse, frantic sentences. The tone changed from matter-of-fact to unsettled, almost fearful. One entry read, "Went out before dawn, saw a doe by the creek. Something off about its eyes, too large, too still. They caught the moonlight like glass, unnerving." Another entry, dated only a day later. It was at the clearing again. Same doe, didn't run even when I raised my rifle. No sign of injury or disease. Yet those eyes, God, they're almost human-like. Didn't pull the trigger. Couldn't. My heart pounded as I read on. The entries spanned days, describing how this particular doe lingered at the edge of his hunting territory. My grandfather tried to approach it. The doe would stare, but never bolt. He wrote, "It lets me get too close. Then it fades back among the trees, quiet as a ghost. I don't understand." The references to the doe's eyes grew more frequent, more disturbed. He wrote about how they reminded him of a person's eyes, as though there was a human mind behind them. One passage made my hair stand on end. "I swear it's watching the cabin at dusk. I see it standing near the tree line, head pointed right at these windows, staring." The final entries were almost illegible, scrawled in shaky script. He described lying awake at night, hearing something outside. Hoofbeats circling the house, soft scraping on the porch. Then the last lines. "It's closer tonight. I think it knows I can see it. Those hollow eyes. God help me, I can't sleep." With that, the journal ended. No conclusion, no explanation of what happened. A creeping chill seeped into my bones. I realized I had goosebumps on my arms despite the roaring fireplace. Who hides a journal behind loose bricks in a fireplace? Someone who's either frightened or paranoid, or both. Outside, darkness had settled. The barest sliver of moonlight pierced the tall pines. I closed the journal, but the disquiet it stirred refused to leave. On a whim, I lit a lantern and stepped onto the cabin's porch, scanning the tree line. The forest beyond was a shape of deeper blackness against the star-sprinkled sky. Part of me expected to see a deer standing motionless, eyes glinting, gazing back at me with some silent, intelligent stare. But there was only the breeze rustling needles overhead and the distant hoot of an owl. Eventually, I returned indoors, latched the door, and banked the fire. The old rocking chair by the hearth seemed inviting enough for me to doze off. I tried to sleep, but my mind replayed the last lines of Grandpa's journal. It's closer tonight. Hoofbeats circling the house. My rational side insisted it was simply the ravings of an aging man, perhaps struggling with dementia or nightmares. Nonetheless, I tensed at every small noise outside a snapping twig, a gust shifting the cabin's timbers. Around midnight, I jolted awake from half-sleep at the sound of something scuffing against the porch boards. My pulse thundered. For a moment, I sat paralyzed, ears straining. Could it be a raccoon or a stray fox? Then I heard a faint but distinct clop like a hoof stepping carefully on wood. Heart hammering, I leapt to my feet. The noise moved along the length of the porch, heading toward the back of the cabin. Soft, measured steps, unhurried, as if the creature were pacing or scouting. I remembered Grandpa's warning. It's closer tonight. I grabbed a flashlight from the side table. The beam flickered across the windows, revealing only the reflection of my tense face. Gathering my courage, I crept to the front door and slowly unlatched it. My fingers trembled. I yanked the door open, shining the flashlight across the porch. Nothing. Just the empty boards and swirling dust motes. A wave of adrenaline left me shaky. As I closed the door again, I caught the faint scent of wet fur or dander drifting on the cold air. I spent the rest of that night fully awake, listening. No more hoofbeats sounded, yet I felt eyes on me, hidden behind the curtain of darkness outside. The next day dawned grey and overcast, with a stiff breeze scattering fallen leaves across the clearing. I was exhausted, but determined to find some logical explanation. After a quick breakfast, I ventured into the woods surrounding the cabin, following old trails I vaguely recalled from childhood visits. The forest in late autumn felt somber, a tapestry of dark trunks and crunchy leaf litter. Patches of moss clung to rocks, and the sky overhead threatened rain. If Grandpa's story about a strange doe had any truth, I might find tracks or signs of deer activity. So I scoured the soft ground near a small creek, discovering typical hoofprints. At first glance, they looked ordinary, but a few sets were oddly spaced, as if the animal sometimes stood still for prolonged periods. The soil was deeply impressed in one spot, forming what seemed like a place where a deer might have stood, watching, waiting. A sense of unease swept over me. The journaling from Grandpa's final weeks suggested the doe was not merely an animal. Could it have been wounded or diseased, giving it that unsettling stare? Could it have been a different species altogether, a misidentified moose or something? My mind spun with possibilities. The hoofprints led deeper into the forest where the trees were denser. I followed them until they vanished in a rocky patch covered in pine needles. Returning to the cabin, I rummaged through the dusty closets and found Grandpa's old hunting rifle. The stock was worn from years of use. He'd taught me the basics of gun safety when I was very young. My skill was rusty at best. Still, a part of me felt safer having the rifle nearby, though I wasn't sure if I could actually shoot a living creature, especially if it turned out to be an ordinary deer. I spent the afternoon tidying the cabin, trying to keep busy and chase away the anxiety. The sun dipped behind the pines earlier than I liked, plunging the clearing into a premature dusk. I braced myself for another tense night. The wind picked up, howling around the cabin's corners. I built a bigger fire and set the rifle within arm's reach. Shadows danced on the wooden walls, flickering in and out of shape. With the journal open on my lap, I reread the final pages, trying to glean any missed detail. No gun seems right for this. My bullets won't matter if it's not truly a deer. If it is, then God help me, I can't kill it. I can't kill something that looks at me with those eyes. My grandfather's words implied a moral hesitation, or perhaps the eyes themselves induced such terror that he couldn't pull the trigger. I considered the moral implications of shooting an animal that, while odd, hadn't harmed him. Yet the talk of hoofbeats circling the house at night left me cold. There was an intent behind such behavior, like an intelligence playing cat and mouse. A crash outside jolted me from my thoughts. Something had toppled a metal bucket near the side of the cabin. I stood, heart racing. Taking the rifle, I edged to the window. The moonless night revealed nothing but blackness. Then I heard a muffled thump, soft but distinct, near the side porch. Every hair on my neck stood up. Summoning courage, I inched through the cabin, turned the back door's knob, and eased it open. The wind carried the scent of damp pine. My flashlight beam cut a narrow path across the steps. There, on the porch, lay the overturned bucket. Drops of water from the earlier rain spattered the boards. No sign of an animal, no footprints. But as I swung the light to the left, I caught a glimpse of something vanishing around the corner. A pale shape, silent and quick. My pulse thundered. I crept forward, shining the flashlight into the yard. The beam illuminated a swirl of mist. Then I spotted it. A deer tall, slender, motionless about 10 yards away. Its coat was a dull brown, blending into the shadows. But its eyes, they reflected an eerie sheen. Not the typical green or white glare of an animal's retina. The reflection was more subdued, almost smoky, and the shape of the eyes seemed off. We stood there, locked in a silent standoff. My rifle felt like dead weight in my hands. I shouldered it, aiming, but a wave of dread washed over me, making my arms shake. The doe just stared. In the faint light, I could swear its eyes held a human-like clarity, hollow and knowing. My mouth went dry. My mouth. Then, without a sound, the doe turned and bounded into the dark. The movement was unnaturally smooth, as though it floated. The underbrush barely stirred in its wake. I exhaled raggedly, lowering the rifle. My heart hammered with mingled relief and terror. Was that truly a doe, or something masquerading as one? I retreated indoors, bolting every lock. Sleep was impossible, so I stoked the fire and paced, mind churning with questions. My gaze kept falling on the journal. What if Grandpa had discovered more about this creature but never recorded it? In an attempt to calm down, I searched the cabin for any additional notes, diaries, or newspaper clippings. I rifled through drawers and rummaged in dusty trunks. Around midnight, in the old trunk by Grandpa's bed, I found a worn envelope containing 2 letters. They were from a friend named Earl, dated around the same period as the journal entries. The letters were cryptic. "Gordon, I believe you about the deer. Saw it once myself near midnight. Something in those eyes. Not natural. My advice? Don't try to kill it. Could bring worse consequences. Keep watch but keep your distance." And another, "You said it's been coming closer. If it's fixated on you, maybe it sees something it wants. Remember the old stories from the next county? People vanishing after following a white stag? Might be the same phenomenon. Don't follow it anywhere, no matter what." No wonder Grandpa was so terrified. He wasn't alone in seeing it. His friend Earl had too, advising caution. A wave of nausea tightened my gut. What does it want? The notion of it seeking something more than just idle curiosity felt almost too terrifying to contemplate. Morning light offered temporary reprieve. I forced myself outside to gather firewood. My eyes constantly flicked to the tree line, half expecting the doe to appear, watching me with that unsettling stare. The forest was eerily quiet. No birdsong, no scurrying of small creatures. Even the wind seemed hushed, as though the whole area waited for something. I discovered fresh deer tracks circling the cabin's perimeter. They were pressed deep, hinting the animal lingered here last night. My mouth went dry. I recalled the journal's final lines about hoofbeats circling. Grandpa might have endured this for weeks. A single question consumed me. Should I stay and confront it, or leave and abandon the cabin? Fear urged me to flee, but a stubborn part felt compelled to solve this mystery, to see if there was a way to break whatever hold this creature had on my family. Perhaps Grandpa's attempts to hide the journal behind the fireplace were to protect me from the same ordeal, or maybe he hoped I'd find it and learn the truth. After wrestling with indecision, I resolved to stay one more night. If the doe appeared again, I'd confront it, maybe scare it off for good. I readied a strong lantern and kept the rifle loaded, though I dreaded pulling the trigger. The third night arrived, painted in the same grey and silver hues as before. Clouds drifted across the moon, and a faint drizzle pattered on the roof. I sat by the window, lantern lit, scanning the yard. Time crawled. My nerves felt raw, every sense heightened. Midnight drew close, and I wondered if the doe would come. A rustle from the far edge of the clearing made me jolt. The silhouette emerged, tall, graceful, stepping delicately through the wet grass. My throat constricted. Even from a distance, I recognized those unnatural eyes reflecting the glow of my lantern. Slowly, I opened the door and stepped onto the porch, rifle in hand. The deer stood about 15 yards away. The drizzle caught the lantern light, forming a halo of mist around its head. I raised the rifle to my shoulder, trying to steady my aim. A soft voice in my mind, or perhaps my own fear, whispered, "Don't shoot." My finger hovered on the trigger. The doe stood calmly, staring. This close, its eyes looked impossibly deep, as though they might contain entire lifetimes of knowledge or sorrow. My breath hitched. I felt like I was gazing at something far older and more powerful than a mere woodland creature. My arms trembled. I lowered the gun. It felt wrong to kill it, if killing it was even possible. Suddenly the doe took a step forward, hooves making no sound on the wet ground. Another step. My heart thumped so loudly it drowned out the drizzle. It was now only 10 yards away, posture relaxed, head tilted. I tried to speak, but no words came. An electric tension hung in the air, as though we stood on the precipice of some unimaginable exchange. The doe's muzzle parted slightly, revealing dark gaps behind its lips. Then it blinked once, slowly. I heard my grandfather's voice in my memory. "It's closer tonight. I think it knows I can see it." And in that moment, I sensed it truly did see me, saw me as more than just a silhouette with a gun. Its eyes reflected not fear, but recognition. A disturbing, intimate recognition. Lightning flashed in the distance, illuminating the treetops. The thunder rolled a moment later, a low rumble that vibrated in my chest. The doe did not flinch. It gazed at me, and for a heartbeat, I could almost swear I heard a whisper in the dark, a soft, breathy sound that shaped my name, like a faint echo carried on the wind. My blood ran cold. I might have screamed. I can't recall. My vision blurred with panic, and I stumbled backward onto the porch. The world tilted. The rifle clattered from my grip. By the time I managed to blink away my disorientation, the doe was retreating, melding into the gloom. I scrambled to my feet, heart in my throat, shining the lantern into the dark. Nothing. Shaken to my core, I picked up the rifle and fled inside, slamming the door. My breaths came in ragged gasps. It whispered my name. That was impossible. Deer don't speak. Yet that impression lodged deep in my mind, refusing to vanish. Dawn arrived, grey and sullen, with a steady rain soaking the clearing. I was beyond exhausted. After a restless sleep, I rose to find muddy hoofprints stamped all around the cabin foundation, as if the doe had circled multiple times in the pre-dawn hours. A wave of dizziness gripped me. This was more than I could handle alone. My first impulse was to call anyone to share the burden, yet I feared sounding insane. The closest neighbor was miles down the forest road. My cell phone had barely any signal here, but I managed a single call to my mother. She listened in stunned silence as I described Grandpa's journal and the strange deer. She said she had known for years that he was haunted by something in those woods, but had written it off as an old man's fancies. I heard genuine worry in her voice when she insisted I come home. "Just leave," she pleaded. "There's no sense in putting yourself in danger." I promised I'd think about it and hung up, feeling directionless. I returned to rummaging around the cabin. Beneath the bed, I found a small strongbox. Inside were a few tarnished hunting medals, a silver bullet casing, and a folded slip of paper with the words, "Sometimes you must let them see you too." I recognized Grandpa's handwriting. The cryptic phrase made little sense, but it felt connected to the notion that the doe recognized him and now recognized me. With each passing hour, the rain subsided. Weak sunlight broke through the clouds. The forest dripped with moisture, the earthy scent of rotting leaves and pine sap filling the air. I realized I couldn't spend another night in terror. I needed to do something, to force a resolution. Perhaps confronting the doe on my own terms was the only way. Dusk arrived again, the forest quiet as if holding its breath. Determined, I took the rifle and a strong flashlight, then made my way toward an old clearing deep in the woods, a place Grandpa used to mention as a good vantage spot. The trail was slick with mud, My pulse pounded as shadows lengthened around me. I half expected the doe to appear at any moment. At the clearing, I found a large boulder near the edge. I climbed atop it, scanning the tree line with my flashlight. The beam picked out dense undergrowth and dripping branches. Minutes ticked by, then an hour. Darkness thickened. My fingers grew numb from the chill. Finally, a shape glided into view among the pines. The doe. My heart lurched. It advanced toward the clearing with unhurried grace, each hoof placed delicately. The flashlight beam caught its eyes again, that unsettling human-like quality. My stomach twisted as it drew within 15 yards. I raised the rifle just to show I was armed. The doe stopped, head tilted, as if curious. For a moment I thought to fire a warning shot into the air, but I hesitated, recalling Grandpa's line. No gun seems right for this. Instead, I lowered the rifle barrel and just shone the flashlight more directly. In that beam, the doe's face became sharper. The hollowness around its eyes was more pronounced, almost as though the sockets were deeper, shadowed. It blinked. My mind spun with fear, yet I forced myself to stand my ground. "What do you want?" I croaked, voice echoing in the silent clearing. The question felt absurd speaking to an animal, and yet some irrational corner of me believed it could understand. The doe remained motionless, raindrops glinting on its coat. Seconds dragged. My breath rasped. Then the doe's ears twitched. It took another step forward. The light caught something in its eyes, a reflection of my own trembling figure. Then, with a sudden shift, it turned its head as though gesturing deeper into the woods. I swallowed hard, remembering Earl's warning. Don't follow it anywhere. Yet my feet seemed magnetically drawn. The doe took another step, glancing back at me with that haunting gaze. My pulse thundered. Was it luring me? Trying to show me something? I forced myself to remain where I was. My entire body shook. "No," I whispered. "I won't follow you." The doe's muscles tensed. For a brief instant it locked eyes with me, and in those hollow pools I sensed an ancient sorrow, a deep well of loneliness or hunger. My chest tightened. Perhaps it had tried this with my grandfather too, beckoning him into the dark. Time froze. The night air pressed in, thick with the scent of damp earth. Then, abruptly, the doe pivoted and bounded away, merging with the shadows. Branches snapped in its wake, but only faintly. Within seconds, it vanished. I stood trembling on that boulder, waves of cold adrenaline coursing through me. My teeth chattered. I stumbled back to the cabin well past midnight, numb with exhaustion. The confrontation had left me drained, but also strangely relieved. I hadn't followed it, and for once the doe didn't circle the house. Maybe I had passed some unspoken test. Or maybe it was simply biding time. I collapsed onto the cabin bed, mind swirling. Vague dreams haunted me. Visions of the doe standing in the clearing, an open, silent invitation. My grandfather's voice echoed. "It's closer tonight." I dreamed that I was stuck at the edge of the forest, unable to move, while the doe approached and whispered my name with a hollow rasp. I woke at dawn, drenched in sweat, heart hammering. Sunlight streamed through the grimy window. A quiet settled over the cabin, almost peaceful. Gingerly, I rose and peered outside. No tracks in the wet earth, no sign of hoofprints. The air felt crisp. A sense of finality tugged at me as if the doe's vigil might be over. I packed my belongings methodically, leaving the cabin as I'd found it, save for the journal. That I tucked into my bag, deciding it needed to come with me. Grandpa's words were too important to leave hidden behind a fireplace again. Perhaps I'd show them to my mother, or maybe keep them locked away until I decided what to do with the cabin long term. Before driving off, I paused one last time on the porch. The clearing lay silent, the pines swaying gently in the breeze. I almost expected the doe to appear for a final farewell. but only a pair of ordinary squirrels darted across the grass. No monstrous eyes stared back at me. Over the next few months, life in the city resumed. Work kept me busy. Yet some nights I'd recall the deer's silent presence and shudder, uncertain if I'd truly escaped its notice. I visited my mother for the holidays, shared parts of Grandpa's journal with her. She looked pale and disturbed, but insisted it was best left in the past. Then, one cold January night, I awoke in my apartment to a faint noise outside my window. Not quite a knock, more like a gentle tap-tap against the glass. My heart thudded. I lived on the second floor. No easy access for anyone out there. Must be a tree branch in the wind. But as I lay back down, I heard it again. Tap, tap. Then, impossibly, a soft scraping, like something large shifting its weight against the ledge. My breath caught. A mental image of hollow, doe-like eyes flickered in my mind. Could it have followed me? The notion was ludicrous. I was hours away from the cabin, and yet the fear was real. Gathering courage, I pulled back the curtain, peering into the darkness. Nothing met my gaze except the faint reflection of my own wide, terrified eyes. I closed the curtain, trying to calm my racing thoughts. The wind must be rattling some loose gutter or stray branch. Eventually I drifted back to sleep, but in the dream that followed, I walked out of my apartment building into a moonlit street, and there, at the far end of the road, stood the doe, silhouette etched against the dim glow of a street lamp. Its hollow eyes locked onto mine. Even in the dream, I felt the chill of recognition, the unspoken promise that it could appear wherever it wished. I woke again at dawn, heart pounding, certain I'd never truly outrun that gaze. Grandpa had tried burying the secret in a fireplace, but it persisted. Earl had warned him that following it or trying to kill it brought consequences. Maybe we were merely witnesses to something ancient, something that wore the shape of a doe to watch and test us. To this day, I keep the journal under lock and key. Sometimes, on restless nights, I reread those final entries, feeling the old terror rise anew. And sometimes, I glance outside my own windows at dusk, half expecting to see a silent silhouette in the distance. Hoofbeats circling the house. It's closer tonight. The wind might rattle the gutters, or maybe it's something else. Part of me fears that if I listen closely, I might hear gentle, deliberate footsteps on the pavement, a reminder that the hollow-eyed doe remains, patient and watchful. And maybe, just maybe, it's waiting for the moment I step outside, let it see me again, and either follow or flee. In that choice, I sense, lies a fate that neither my grandfather nor I ever fully grasped.